Now, those of you who know your way around this part of Genesis doubtless have queries over the birth order of Noah's sons, which I have presented, which has Ham as the eldest, Japheth in the middle, and Shem as the youngest. Well, wherever Noah's sons are listed, this birth order is the only one that can be substantiated. Therefore, it is the right one. 6 times we see the listing, 5 within Genesis. The first occurrence is Genesis 5:32, and Noah was 500 years old, and Noah begat Shem, Ham, and Japheth. All 5 verses present them listed in this order. Shem is certainly not the eldest because Noah had his first son at 500 years of age, and yet Shem was only 98 when Noah was 600 at the flood. We note that Shem was 98 because he was in his 100th year, 2 years and counting after the flood. Therefore, by the mathematics, there was at least one son born to Noah before Shem. And by using the same principle as that of Shem having had 3 sons into that 3rd year after the flood, likewise respecting Noah, it is plausible that he had his 3rd son, Shem, into his 503rd year, without yet actually being 503 years old. And this makes perfect sense with the listing given here. Shem is placed first because he is rendered promotion due to him being the sovereign choice of God, being that God's people and the Messiah would come from his loins. Therefore, Ham is consequently placed second and is yet to be eldest, leaving Japheth third, though he was in fact the middle son. And this reasoning is easily settled until we read what Moses wrote about Ham after Ham had defiled his own mother, Genesis 9:24, and Noah awoke from his wine and knew what his younger son had done unto him. Now before we go on, some have supposed that the younger or youngest son here actually refers to Canaan, according to the understanding that Canaan is the youngest son of Ham. And so this would consequently mean that this entire woeful episode happened decades after the flood, of course. But this leaves the pronoun son too far away from the proper noun Canaan in order to read it unawkwardly. Incidentally, the sentence in translation can accommodate the comparative younger or the superlative youngest, because I'm told Hebrew doesn't make the distinction of comparative or superlative with either of 2 words, but uses one word, leaving the context to distinguish whether it be comparative or superlative. For example, if there had been only 2 brothers, then the comparative would be suitably used. But being that there were 3 brothers, then the superlative should have been used. Therefore, leaving the notion that the youngest son here refers to Canaan aside, it appears settled that Ham is actually the youngest, leaving us to wonder about the listing of genealogy. To add to this conundrum, we then read that Japheth is actually the eldest, Genesis 10:21, and to Shem also, the brother of Japheth, the elder, even to him were children born. And again, the same applies, respecting comparative and superlative. The context here clearly shows that the comparative is to be understood due to there being only 2 brothers in view. So, despite the listing, it appears that Japheth is the eldest, then Shem, and then Ham is the youngest. And then this does make the order correct in the Table of Nations, for Shem has been, I won't say demoted, but suitably placed last, because the rest of the book of Genesis is going to expand on his progeny. Therefore, Japheth is first, as the supposed elder. Ham, the supposed youngest, is consequently placed second. If this order of birth be true, then what do we do with the original listing? To say that the listing has undergone inversion to me is insufficient reasoning. Moreover, the narrative, which I have presented, of why Ham had sex with his mother becomes untenable. The answer lies with the comparative/superlative. Hebrew actually doesn't have an outright equivalent for our words younger or youngest, or elder/eldest. It uses a word which translates to the comparative less or the superlative least, depending on the context, and also a word which translates to the comparative more or superlative most, again depending on the context. And this may apply to ages, but this also can equally apply to importance. Therefore, After Ham committed this abhorrent act of having sex with his unconscious mother, he became to Noah and to God, with Noah having 3 sons in his sight. Therefore, to use the superlative, Ham became the least of the brothers. Correspondingly, where Japheth is mentioned as the elder, the comparative being suitably used, because this is before Shem's viewpoint, who was the most important, Japheth became Japheth the more important, due to the demotion of Ham. And so now this explains how Ham went from the eldest in age to the lowest in importance, while Japheth went from the middle son to a more important status. Therefore, the listing and the table of nations reflects this perfectly, and our narrative of why Ham sunk to such base means stands. And while we're here, let us note that although Canaan wasn't Noah's son, but his grandson, he was Noah's wife's son, and therefore a brother to Japheth and Shem. Yet they were also his uncles. And so Canaan was raised obviously in Noah's tent, which yields the reason why those of Moses' day understood Noah to have had 4 sons.
I shall be uploading the entire series of Ham is the father of Canaan, but I thought that Noah was. If, however, you would like to purchase the book or ebook, then these options are available on Amazon. I also recommend to you my other publication, Nimrod, The Easy Way to Be a Mighty One, which correlates at times with this particular discourse. My name is John Edgar Townsend. I trust that you will have a blessed day.